make money, big money.
There is a black market for Cuban baseball players.
Major League Baseball can no longer say that they don't know what's going on.
For more than a century, baseball has been called America's pastime. Given a ball and a bat, a group of kids would get together after school and on weekends to literally pass the time. Eventually, the sport became professional and eventually a multi-billion-dollar industry. In recent years, however, America's pastime has fallen on hard times, with scandals involving players using performance-enhancing drugs given in a clinic right here in South Florida. Now there's information of a troubling trend with human trafficking of Cuban baseball players, and Cuban exiles are implicated.
In Cuba, baseball is a way of life, and it's a way to become famous on the island. It's a way to live a little bit better. But baseball is just it seems to be a part of the fabric of life in Cuba.
There's no mysteries about where the great baseball is being played. And instead of being played in Havana or in Villa Rica or wherever, you're now playing in the United States in front of a massive audience, and you're displaying your talents.
El jugador en Cuba vive miserablemente y oye hablar de las grandes ligas, oye hablar del béisbol, del dinero que se gana. Y todo eso, por supuesto, es la ilusión de todo jugador, de todo pelotero. No ahora, de toda la América Latina, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Puerto Rico, Dominicana, que han producido estrellas, muchos de ellos en el Hall de la Fama. Pero, ¿cuál es la idea? ¿Cuál es el propósito de todo? Llegar a las grandes ligas.
Baseball has always been held up as a symbol against Yankee imperialism. And whenever possible, any player that has been able to come to the United States, well, everybody wants him because he's going to be good.
Over the past 10 years, I would say that 98 players out of 100 have left with smugglers on speedboats. It's been a night and day change.
Smuggling is smuggling. It's hard to distinguish between whether you're doing people or drugs. By and large, you can assume that anybody here that's playing and is Cuban in origin or Cuban by birth got here in some illegal and clandestine way, either through Mexico or in the old-fashioned way, coming through the Straits.
There are two ways Cuban ball players can negotiate a contract with Major League Baseball. They can come to the U.S. through the wet foot, dry foot policy, which allows Cubans who set foot on U.S. soil to stay and go through the amateur draft, limiting the amount of money they can make. Or they can establish residency in a third country such as Mexico, where they would then negotiate as free agents, bringing them the most money.
In Cuba, you don't see many rafters anymore because they usually get arrested or something. But you see speedboats coming. That speedboat costs between $10,000 and $15,000. Do you think a speedboat can get into Cuba and out without being seen by the Cuban government? No. There is a cut of that money that goes to the Cuban government.
Somebody in Cuba is profiting from the defection of high-profile Cuban players. So it doesn't really stand to reason that some of the most famous people in Cuba would be able to quickly succeed in leaving the island if people in Cuba weren't somehow involved with facilitating those defections. It's just a matter of who they are.
This is not part of just somebody wanting to leave Cuba. This is part of a repressive regime that gets a cut of this, and that's what they want to do with the baseball players.
Every smuggler I was ever contacted by was a Cuban-born Cuban-American. Cuban exiles who've gone into business bringing other Cubans off the island.
But every once in a while, a Cuban player comes along that's just so terrific, a phenom, so to speak, that he's going to bring people into the park. A good example is, the most recent example, of course, is Yasiel Puig.
I got a phone call when Puig was smuggled over. And the first day they wanted $250,000 as the fee. And by day two or day three, the fee had jumped up to $500,000. That wasn't a deal I was going to do anyway. On some level, you can argue that smugglers are a necessary evil for players like Puig. He left Cuba in early June of 2012, And by July, he had signed a $42 million contract with the Dodgers.
Es mucho el dinero que entran ganando, Helen. Entran ganando millones. De un día a otro se convierten en millonarios. Personas que desgraciadamente en Cuba tienen que ir colgados de un ómnibus, en bicicleta, mal alimentados. Y llegar aquí y encontrarlo todo es distinto.
The minimum salary for the 2014 season is $500,000, but the players that are smuggled don't get to keep all of their newfound fortunes.
I would anticipate the minimum the agents for those players are charging is 5%. And in total, between the agents and the smugglers, who are essentially working as partners these days, I've heard the players are now paying 25 to 35%.
Some of that money goes to guns, it goes to buy drugs, it goes to kill people. You're funding drug cartels.
Anytime there's big money, there's potential for violence, especially when you're dealing with people who are willing to break the law in the first place. They're not playing by the same rules that everybody else plays by.
These are people that know that this player is about to make a lot of money. And for the time being, that person has all the power. And that person essentially can extort money out of them.
These deals are basically illegal. They're basically illegal from the start. They're smuggled out of Cuba illegally. They're smuggled into foreign countries illegally. The smugglers or the agents obtain foreign residency papers almost always in an illegal fashion. The market for Cuban defectors has turned into a cesspool, and it's certainly not for the faint of heart, and not for people who don't want to risk imprisonment or other problems.
Some say this Major League Baseball controversy is due to a little-known rule enacted by former MLB Commissioner Bowie Kuhn in the 1970s. Still others say it's a byproduct of the trade embargo with Cuba.
The Kuhn directive extended the U.S. embargo to Canada in terms of Major League Baseball. It put the Montreal Expos and the Toronto Blue Jays under the same rules as the 24 other Major League Baseball teams at the time in the United States. So basically everybody had to follow the same rules. Otherwise, it would have been a situation where Toronto and Montreal could have potentially gone to Cuba, signed players, and the other 24 teams wouldn't have been able to because of the embargo. It's unclear if baseball was being Machiavellian in crafting these rules, or if it was the law of unintended consequences rearing its ugly head.
To think that because of an embargo, this is causing a problem for baseball players to make millions. No, human rights trumps that. And the fact that they have been instruments to sending somebody to prison is even worse. And the fact that they are, the embargo has nothing to do with this, because we have the same thing happening in other countries where there is no embargo. And you have the coyotes bringing people in and risking their lives. So leave the embargo out of this. The fact that there is a repressive regime in Cuba is the issue. It's not the embargo.
There's nothing that Major League Baseball can do about the embargo. It is what it is. It's a product of our State Department and the way that they handle Cuba. Regardless, take the embargo out of the equation.
The smugglers are basically figuring out who the best players are in Cuba, going there, bringing them out themselves, and then trying to sell them to agents afterward.
The state of Florida has taken one initiative to possibly impede human trafficking of Cuban baseball players, letting Major League Baseball know the legislature is monitoring the ugly side of this very lucrative business.
What this legislation attempted to accomplish was, one, ask Major League Baseball to share with the Attorney General's office the names of folks that they suspected were involved with human trafficking, smuggling Cuban baseball players to Mexico and other countries for the purposes of free agency. And secondly, what this really was an amendment to a sports package that allows professional teams to draw down dollars from our state.
Vote for this bill for every young boy in Cuba that wants a fair chance to come to this country and play baseball without having to be forced into the arms of human traffickers, smugglers, and drug cartels. That's more important to me, frankly, than what stadium gets built.
We had incredible support in both chambers. This is an issue that passed unanimously, full support, and a bipartisan group of legislators coming together and say, we stand with you in trying to make this injustice go away.
The underlying difficulty is, of course, is the fact that Cuban baseball players are foreclosed from dealing with and negotiating directly with the 30 teams that constitute Major League Baseball. because of the rules and regulations that Major League Baseball has agreed to in terms of dealing with Cuba.
In response to the Florida legislation regarding MLB and the role of human trafficking, the MLB responded with the following statement. While the sponsors of the bill in Florida blame MLB policies for the role of human smugglers, they do not provide any support for their premise. However, we will meet with the Players Association to determine whether changes can be made.
It's good to hear that the folks at Major League Baseball want to meet with the Players Association, but the fact is that they have set up this unique rule for one country. That's the only country that it affects.
The Miami Marlins and the Tampa Devil Rays are the only teams that this legislation would affect. Neither team is currently in violation. In response to this Issues Reports investigation, the Miami Marlins issued the following statement. Rules on draft eligibility and free agency are determined at the league level through MLB, not by individual MLB clubs. So the Marlins are not in a position to address any questions relating to this Florida legislation. Major League Baseball has a few decisions to make. They can change the rules that regulate how all international players can negotiate their contracts, thus avoiding any issue involving the Cuban embargo and/or human trafficking. Or they could choose to not do anything and let the current process continue.
They don't care. They want a guy who's like Chapman, who plays for the Cincinnati Reds, who can throw the baseball 100 miles an hour for 2 or 3 innings.
Major League Baseball simply wants the best players from around the world, and how they end up in Major League Baseball probably isn't a prime concern for them. Major League Baseball is run on Park Avenue in New York City. It might as well be a million miles away from the sandlots of Latin America.
Major League Baseball is perhaps being an accomplice to really causing physical and mental harm to their future players. That's not the message that they want to send. And we're hopeful that this law and these stories shine that necessary light so that the leadership pays attention and finally makes a change.
Given the scandals, do baseball fans care, and should they?
Fans probably should care. You can also understand that when fans go to a sporting event, they just want to enjoy the sporting event. They don't necessarily want to hear about contracts. They don't want to hear about rules. They don't want to hear about laws.
El público cada día es más fanático del béisbol. Yo decía que el béisbol es el deporte número 1 en los Estados Unidos. Será que yo soy fanático del béisbol, pero indiscutiblemente que no hay duda alguna de que el fanático disfruta el béisbol. Y el fanático es manager de glorieta.
Major League Baseball is in something of a no-win situation.
And in a way, I don't fault them. I mean, I'm saying they're looking the other way. It's their obligation as a corporation. But you're going to do whatever you need to do as a corporation to protect the corporate interest. And the corporate interest is having good players. And so it isn't the first time that American capitalism has looked the other way.